The Galactic Academy floated in the darkness of space like a giant silver wheel. It was built on a station called Prime, far away from any planet, in a place where ships from 100 different worlds could reach it easily. For nearly 300 years, young people from dozens of alien species had come here to learn together. They studied science, history, languages, and diplomacy. The academy was supposed to be a place where different species could understand each other and build friendships that would last across the stars. When humanity finally joined the galactic community, their children were allowed to attend. It had taken years of negotiations, tests, and proving that humans were civilized enough to mix with species that had traveled between stars for thousands of years. Most aliens still thought of humans as newcomers, barely worth noticing. Earth had only discovered faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. In galactic terms, humans were like babies taking their first steps. Monroe arrived at the academy on a cold morning in the station's artificial winter cycle. She was 17 years old, with auburn hair that she kept tied back in a simple ponytail. Her eyes were green, quiet, and watchful. She did not smile much, and she spoke even less. Most of the aliens who saw her walk through the corridors on her first day barely gave her a second look. She was small by galactic standards, unremarkable, just another human. Her father was Commander Daniel Monroe, a man who worked in the diplomatic corps. He had spent 15 years building relationships with alien governments, learning their customs, understanding their politics. He had pulled every favor he could to get enrolled at the academy. Education here meant opportunities that no Earth school could offer. It meant a future among the stars. But Daniel Monroe was not a fool. He knew the galaxy could be a dangerous place for humans. Before left Earth, he had made sure she was ready. Found her assigned room in the student housing section. It was small but clean, with a bed that adjusted to human body temperature, a desk with a built-in computer, and a window that looked out at the endless stars. She unpacked her few belongings and sat on the bed for a long moment, looking at a photograph of her family back on Earth. Her mother, her younger brother, the house in Colorado where she had grown up. She missed them already, but she had work to do. The first few weeks were difficult. Attended classes on subjects that made her head spin: quantum mechanics, galactic history going back millions of years, the biology of species that breathed methane or lived in the vacuum of space. She took notes on everything, asked questions when she did not understand, and spent her evenings studying until her eyes burned. She ate her meals alone. The cafeteria was a massive hall with food stations designed for dozens of different species. Found the human section and ate quietly, watching the other students. She saw groups of friends laughing together, species that had known each other for centuries mixing easily. They sat in one corner, large and intimidating with their blue scales and sharp teeth. They clustered together in another area, small and delicate, their wings folded against their backs. They moved in groups of 4, their multiple arms gesturing as they spoke in their clicking language. No one invited to join them. No one seemed interested in the quiet human girl who kept to herself. She found peace in the botanical gardens. The academy maintained a large section filled with plants from 100 different worlds. There was a corner where earth plants grew under artificial sunlight. Roses, oak trees, grass would sit there during her free time, reading or just breathing in the familiar sense of home. It was in the gardens that she first noticed him watching her. His name was Axe, and he stood nearly 7 feet tall, his body covered in thick blue scales that could stop a knife blade. His eyes were yellow with vertical pupils, like a predator from Earth. His family was wealthy and powerful. His father sat on the station's Commerce Council and controlled mining operations across 3 star systems. At the academy, Axe was treated like royalty. More than that, he was feared. Learned about him from overheard conversations and careful observation. Axe had been bullying other students for years. He targeted the weak, the small, the species that could not fight back. They were his favorite victims. He would corner them in empty corridors, take their belongings, push them around. Sometimes he hurt them badly enough that they needed medical treatment. Nothing ever happened to him. His family was too powerful. The academy administrators looked the other way. Watched him from the gardens as he walked past with his followers. Two other students always accompanied him. One was with 4 arms and a cruel smile. The other was a silicate, a species made of living crystal that hummed with barely contained aggression. Together, the 3 of them ruled the academy through fear. Axe caught watching him one day. Their eyes met across the garden, and she saw something in his expression that made her stomach tighten. Interest. The kind of interest a predator shows when it spots potential prey. She looked away and went back to her reading, but she could feel his gaze on her for a long time after. Over the next few weeks, noticed Axe appearing more often. He would be in the corridor when she walked to class. He would be in the cafeteria when she ate. He would pass by the gardens when she sat reading. He never spoke to her. He just watched with those yellow predator eyes, studying her the way a hunter studies its target. Understood what was happening. She had seen bullies before on Earth. They looked for weakness. They looked for victims who would not fight back, who would submit quietly and let themselves be hurt. She knew that her silence, her habit of keeping her head down and avoiding trouble, must look like weakness to someone like Axe. She thought about telling someone. The academy had counselors and security officers, but she had also heard the stories. Other students had complained about Axe before. Nothing had changed. His family's power protected him like a shield. So did what her father had taught her to do. She prepared. Every evening after her studies were done, she went to her room and practiced. The movements her father had insisted she learn before leaving Earth. 4 different martial arts disciplines, adapted and refined over thousands of years of human history. Techniques designed to bring down opponents larger and stronger than any human. Pressure points, joint locks, strikes that could disable without killing. She practiced until her muscles ached and sweat dripped down her face. Then she practiced more. Knew the confrontation was coming. She could feel it approaching like a storm on the horizon. Axe was circling closer every day, building up to something. She did not know when it would happen or where, but she knew it would happen. And when it did, she would be ready. 6 weeks after her arrival at the Galactic Academy, Monroe woke up on a Tuesday morning with a strange feeling in her chest. The artificial sunlight came through her window, warm and familiar. She got dressed in her academy uniform, ate a small breakfast, and gathered her tablet for the day's classes. Something was different today. She could feel it in the air, like electricity before a thunderstorm. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. Green eyes looked back at her, calm and steady. Today, she thought, it happens today. She walked out the door and headed toward the xenobiology lab. The corridor outside the xenobiology lab was long and wide, built to accommodate species of all sizes. Metal walls curved upward to a high ceiling where lights glowed softly, simulating the gentle illumination of a cloudy day. Students moved through the space in groups, heading to their next classes, their conversations filling the air with a dozen different languages that the translation devices converted into understandable speech. Walked alone, as she always did. Her tablet was pressed against her chest, and her footsteps made soft sounds on the metal floor. She was thinking about the upcoming lecture on cellular regeneration in aquatic species when a shadow fell across her path. She stopped. Axe stood directly in front of her, blocking the corridor. His massive body took up most of the space, forcing other students to walk around him. His yellow eyes looked down at her with an expression she had seen before, back on Earth. It was the look of someone who believed they had absolute power over another person, the look of a bully who had never been told no. His 2 followers flanked him. The stood to his left, all 4 arms crossed over his chest. The silicate stood to his right, its crystalline body pulsing with inner light. Together, the 3 of them formed a wall that could not pass. Other students had stopped to watch. A circle was forming around the confrontation, bodies pressing against the corridor walls. Could see their faces, dozens of different species, all wearing the same expression. Fear, anticipation, relief that they were not the ones being targeted. None of them moved to help. None of them ever did. Axe spoke, his deep voice rumbling through the translator clipped to his collar. Human. Did not look up. She kept her eyes on his chest, on the thick scales that covered his torso like armor. Excuse me, I need to get to class. Your class can wait. He took a step closer, and she could smell him now. His species gave off a scent like copper and burning metal. I have been thinking about your kind, human. About the mistake the Galactic Council made when they allowed you to leave your planet. Said nothing. She focused on her breathing, keeping it slow and steady. Her heart was beating faster, but she did not let it show on her face. My grandfather spoke of Earth before he died, Axe continued. He said your people were animals when we first discovered you, living in dirt and fighting over scraps. He said you should have been contained, quarantined on your world like the disease you are. Some of the watching students laughed quietly. They made a clicking sound that his translator rendered as amusement. Remain silent. Look at me when I speak to you, Axe growled. His voice had dropped lower, more dangerous. Show proper respect to your betters. I don't want any trouble, kept her voice calm, almost flat. Please let me pass. Trouble? Axe laughed, and the sound echoed off the metal walls like thunder. You misunderstand, little mammal. I am not offering you trouble. I am offering you a lesson in your proper place in this galaxy. His clawed hand shot out faster than most eyes could follow. We're predators, evolved for quick strikes and overwhelming force. His fingers closed around his wrist like a metal clamp, his grip tight enough to leave bruises on human skin. Pain shot up her arm but did not cry out. She had been expecting this. On your knees, human. Axe pulled her closer, forcing her arm up at an uncomfortable angle. Kneel before me and apologize for the insult of your presence at this academy. Apologize for the crime of your species thinking it belongs among the stars. The corridor had gone completely silent. Every student watched, frozen in place. Some looked away, unable to witness what was happening. Others stared with wide eyes, horrified but unable to move. This was how it always went. This was how Axe maintained his power, through fear, through the understanding that no one would stand against him. Finally looked up. Her green eyes met his yellow ones, and something in her expression changed. It was subtle, barely noticeable. A slight narrowing of her eyelids, a tightening around the corners of her mouth. The fear that Axe expected to see, the terror that he had witnessed in so many victims before, was simply not there. Instead, he saw something else entirely. You have 3 seconds to let go of me, said. Her voice was quiet but clear. Every student in the corridor heard her. Axe blinked. For a moment he was genuinely confused. This was not how victims behaved. This was not how small, weak creatures responded when a predator had them in its grasp. They begged, they cried, they submitted. They did not issue warnings. He recovered quickly, his confusion turning to anger. His grip tightened on her wrist and felt the bones in her arm grind together. The pain was intense, but she did not react. She just kept looking at him with those steady green eyes. Or what? Axe leaned down until his face was inches from hers. His breath was hot against her skin, smelling of copper and something rotten. What could a soft little human possibly do to me? You are nothing. Your entire species is nothing. You have no claws, no scales, no strength. You are prey, human. You have always been prey. Did not blink. 3 seconds are up. What happened next occurred so fast that most of the watching students could not follow it. They saw movement, a blur of motion, and then suddenly everything was different. The massive who had terrorized the academy for years was no longer standing. He was falling, and the small human girl who should have been helpless was somehow guiding that fall, controlling it, directing it like water flowing around stones. The tried to intervene. He reached out with two of his four arms, attempting to grab from behind. But she was already moving, already anticipating the attack. She twisted in a way that seemed impossible for a human body, sliding under his reach and driving her elbow into a spot beneath his arm that made him gasp and stumble backward. The silicate charged forward, its crystalline body glowing brighter with aggressive energy, dropped low, letting its momentum carry it past her, then struck at the joints where its leg segments connected. The crystal being let out a sound like breaking glass and crashed to the floor. In less than 10 seconds, all three of the most feared students at the Galactic Academy were on the ground. Stood over Axe. He was face down on the metal floor, his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that promised broken bones if he struggled. Her knee pressed into his spine, directly over a nerve cluster that sent waves of agony through his body every time he tried to move. The corridor was utterly silent. Hundreds of eyes stared at the scene, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Species that had known humans for decades, that had classified them as harmless and weak and barely worth considering, were suddenly looking at Monroe as if they had never seen a human before. Leaned down until her lips were close to Axe's ear. When she spoke, her voice was soft, meant only for him, but in the perfect silence of the corridor, everyone heard. On Earth, we have a saying, never mistake kindness for weakness. I was being kind before. I was giving you every chance to walk away, but you didn't take it. She increased the pressure on his arm slightly, and he let out a whimper that no had ever made before. Remember this moment. Remember that you thought I was prey. Remember how wrong you were. She released him and stood up, stepping back. Axe did not move. He lay on the floor, breathing hard, his yellow eyes wide with something he had never experienced before. Fear. Picked up her tablet, which had fallen during the confrontation. She straightened her uniform, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and looked around at the watching students. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful. "I'm going to be late for class," she said simply. The crowd parted for her like water around a stone. She walked through the gap they created, her footsteps the only sound in the corridor. No one spoke. No one moved. They just watched her go, this small human girl who had just changed everything they thought they knew about her species. Behind her, Axe finally managed to push himself up to his hands and knees. He looked at the space where she had been standing, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be the prey instead of the predator. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. The security office at Galactic Academy was located in the central hub of the station, a circular room filled with screens that displayed footage from thousands of cameras throughout the complex. Officer, with 6 tentacles and compound eyes that could process visual information faster than any human computer, sat at his console and watched the footage from Corridor 7 for the 15th time. He still could not believe what he was seeing. The timestamps showed the entire confrontation lasted exactly 12 seconds from start to finish. But the crucial part, the part that every security officer on the station had gathered to watch, took place in just 10 seconds. 10 seconds that would be studied, analyzed, and discussed for years to come. Slowed the footage down to quarter speed and watched again. In the first second, the human girl's free hand came up in a blur of motion. Her palm struck the inside of this elbow at a very specific angle, hitting a point where the scales were thinner and the joint was exposed. Had evolved thick armor on their bodies, but evolution could not cover every gap. Their species had dominated their home world because nothing there had ever learned to exploit those gaps. Humans apparently had learned. The strike compromised Axe's grip just enough for what came next. In the second and third seconds, the girl rotated her trapped wrist in a motion that used its own strength against him. Instead of trying to pull away, which would have been useless against his greater power, she stepped into him. Her shoulder drove into his midsection, targeting another gap in his scaled armor. had studied physiology as part of his training. The spot the girl hit was not well known. It was a weakness that scientists had only recently discovered themselves, a place where their nervous system came close to the surface. The impact would not have caused permanent damage, but it would have sent a shock of confusion through his body, breaking his concentration for a critical moment. Seconds 4 and 5 showed the stumbling backward. His balance had been compromised by an opponent who should not have been able to move him. The girl stayed with him, her movements smooth and controlled. There was no wasted energy, no wild swings, nothing that suggested fear or desperation. Every motion was precise, calculated, designed for maximum effect with minimum effort. In second 6, her elbow connected with the nerve cluster behind Axe's jaw. Paused the footage here and zoomed in. The strike was perfect. Not too hard, which would have caused serious injury. Not too soft, which would have had no effect. It was exactly enough to make the legs buckle beneath him. How did she know about that nerve cluster? Human scientists had only identified it 3 years ago, and the information had never been widely published. The average galactic citizen did not know that had such a vulnerability, but this teenage girl had known, and she had exploited it with the precision of a surgeon. Seconds 7 and 8 showed what could only describe as a controlled descent. The girl guided her much larger opponent to the ground while maintaining control of his arm. She moved like water, flowing around his attempts to recover, anticipating every motion before he made it. There was not just falling. He was being taken down, systematically and efficiently. By second 9, Axe was face down on the floor with his arm twisted behind his back. The girl's knee pressed into his spine at another specific point, another nerve cluster that had to look up in his database. The pain would have been intense, the kind of pain that made thought impossible. Second 10 was the end. The lay still, completely defeated, whimpering sounds coming from his mouth that had never heard from that species before. The security chief entered the room, a tall female from a species did not recognize. She watched the footage over his shoulder without speaking. "I have watched it 50 times now," said. "I still do not understand how she did it." "Have you researched the techniques she used?" Nodded, pulling up files on his screen. "They are called martial arts. Humans developed them thousands of years ago, before they had technology, when they had to fight animals much larger and stronger than themselves. They learned to use leverage, momentum, and knowledge of anatomy to defeat opponents who should have been able to kill them easily." The security chief studied the files. "These techniques are designed for combat against their own species." "That is what I thought at first, but look here." Pulled up another document. "Humans have been studying galactic species since first contact. Their scientists have been mapping anatomical weaknesses, nerve clusters, pressure points. They have been adapting their fighting techniques to work against us, without anyone noticing. We did not consider them a threat. None of us did. They are small and soft and weak. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. By galactic standards, they should be prey animals." Looked back at the frozen image of Monroe standing over the defeated. "We were wrong." The security chief was silent for a long moment. "Send a copy of this footage to the diplomatic corps. They need to update their assessment of human capabilities." "The girl's father is in the diplomatic corps, Commander Daniel Monroe." "Is he?" The security chief's voice carried no expression, but could sense her concern. "Find out more about him. Find out if this training is standard for human children or if this girl is exceptional." Began accessing Earth's public databases, searching for information about human martial arts training. What he found surprised him. Combat training was common among humans, even for children. They learned to fight almost from the time they could walk, not because they were naturally violent, but because their history had taught them that they needed to be ready. Earth had been a dangerous place, predators with claws and fangs, hostile environments that could kill in minutes, other humans who wanted what they had. For thousands of years, humanity had survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and more capable of violence than anything else on their planet. Now they were among the stars, and they had brought those skills with them. Pulled up the footage again and watched the 10 seconds one more time. He focused on the girl's face throughout the confrontation. There was no anger there, no hatred, no pleasure in causing pain. Her expression was calm, focused, professional. She had done what needed to be done, nothing more and nothing less. That was perhaps the most frightening part. In the medical bay on the other side of the station, Axe lay on a bed designed for patients. His arm was immobilized while the regeneration equipment worked on the strained joints and damaged nerves. His father stood beside him with fury burning in his yellow eyes. "Tell me again," demanded. "Tell me exactly what happened." "I told you already, father." Axe's voice was weak, humiliated. "The human girl attacked me without warning. She used some kind of forbidden combat technique. The footage shows you grabbing her first. The footage shows you threatening her." Axe looked away. "She should have submitted. She should have known her place. She is just a human." Stared at his son for a long moment. "And now you are lying here, defeated by a creature half your size. A creature you called weak and primitive. Do you understand what this means? Do you understand what you have done?" "Father, You have shown the entire galaxy that humans can defeat in single combat. Every species that has ever feared us is now watching that footage and reconsidering their opinions. You have made us look weak." His voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "And you did it because you could not control yourself around a teenage girl." Axe had no response to that. He lay on the medical bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying those 10 seconds in his mind over and over again. The speed of her movements, the precision of her strikes, the look in her eyes when she warned him to let go. He had not listened. He had been so certain of his superiority that he could not imagine any other outcome. Now he knew better. Somewhere in the academy, Monroe was sitting in her xenobiology class, taking notes on cellular regeneration. She had not missed a single lecture. She had not told anyone what happened. When other students stared at her or whispered to each other, she simply ignored them and focused on her studies. Her father would be coming soon, she knew. There would be questions and meetings and diplomatic complications. But for now, she was just a student who had wanted nothing more than to attend her classes in peace. She had asked nicely. She had given a warning. It was not her fault that Axe had not listened. Dean L. had served as the head of Galactic Academy for 47 years. In that time, he had dealt with conflicts between species that had been enemies for. He had navigated political situations that could have started interstellar wars. He had managed students from cultures so different that they could barely comprehend each other's existence. Nothing had prepared him for this. His office was large, designed to accommodate beings of all sizes. The walls were curved and smooth, decorated with artifacts from 100 different worlds. Soft light came from panels in the ceiling, adjustable to suit the visual preferences of any species. 3 chairs sat before his desk, each one capable of reshaping itself to fit whatever body occupied it. Monroe sat in one of those chairs. She was small, even by human standards, her auburn hair still pulled back in its simple ponytail. Her uniform was clean and pressed, showing no sign of the confrontation that had occurred 3 hours earlier. Her hands rested in her lap, her posture straight, her expression calm. She looked like any other student called to the dean's office for a minor disciplinary matter. Commander Daniel Monroe sat beside her. He had arrived on an emergency diplomatic transport 90 minutes after receiving the call. His uniform was crisp and formal, decorated with the symbols of his rank and the medals he had earned over 15 years of service. His face was carefully neutral, revealing nothing of his thoughts. Against the far wall stood Father of Axe. The massive had not taken a seat. He stood with his arms crossed over his chest, his yellow eyes burning with barely controlled rage. Every few moments, a low growl escaped his throat, the sound of a predator its prey. Dean L. folded his tentacles before him and regarded the three of them with his compound eyes. He had watched the security footage 7 times. He had read the witness statements. He had consulted with his legal advisors and his diplomatic staff. And still, he was not entirely sure how to proceed. "This is an unusual situation," he began, his voice calm and measured. "In my 47 years at this academy, I have never seen anything quite like it." "There is nothing unusual about it," growled. "A human attacked my son. She should be expelled, punished. Her entire species should be removed from this station." "The footage shows a different story," Commander Monroe said. His voice was even without any trace of aggression. "Your son initiated physical contact. He grabbed my daughter's wrist with enough force to cause visible bruising. He threatened her verbally before witnesses. She defended herself. She humiliated him. She humiliated our entire species. She stopped a threat using the minimum force necessary. If she had wanted to humiliate him, she could have done much worse." His growl deepened. "Is that a threat, human?" "It is a statement of fact." Commander Monroe turned to face the directly. "Your son believed that humans were weak, that we were prey. He learned otherwise. The manner of his education is regrettable, but the lesson itself was necessary." Dean L. raised a tentacle before could respond. "Enough. We are not here to trade accusations. We are here to determine the facts and decide on an appropriate course of action." He turned his attention to. She had not spoken since entering the office. She had simply sat quietly, watching the adults argue about her future with an expression of patient calm. "Miss Monroe," the dean said, "in your own words, please describe what happened." Considered the question for a moment before answering. "I was walking to my xenobiology class. Axe and his 2 companions blocked my path. He said insulting things about humanity. He grabbed my wrist and demanded that I kneel before him. I asked him to let go. He refused. I defended myself. The footage shows that you gave him a warning, 3 seconds to release you." "Yes." "And when he did not comply, you used physical force to free yourself." "Yes." "The techniques you used were highly effective. Several of our security analysts have studied the footage extensively. They estimate that the entire physical altercation lasted approximately 10 seconds. The dean paused. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Glanced at her father, who gave a small nod. "My father arranged training for me before I left Earth. He wanted me to be able to protect myself if necessary." "Your technique seemed specifically designed to exploit vulnerabilities. Nerve clusters, joint weaknesses, pressure points that are not common knowledge. Human scientists have been studying galactic species since first contact. We learn about everyone we meet. It is how we survive." Made a sound of disgust. "You see, they have been preparing to attack us. They have been studying our weaknesses, planning for the day when they would strike." "We have been preparing to defend ourselves," corrected him quietly. "There is a difference." The room fell silent. Dean L. studied the young human for a long moment. She met his gaze without flinching, her green eyes steady and unafraid. There was no anger in her expression, no hostility, just calm certainty. This was not a violent person, the dean realized. This was not someone who enjoyed hurting others. This was someone who had been pushed into a corner and had done what was necessary to protect herself. Nothing more and nothing less. "The footage is clear," he said finally. Axe initiated the physical confrontation. He made verbal threats. He used his superior size and strength to intimidate and assault a fellow student. Miss Monroe's actions, while dramatic, were defensive in nature. "This is unacceptable," began, but the dean cut him off. "What is unacceptable is that your son has been terrorizing other students for years without consequence. What is unacceptable is that this academy allowed a climate of fear and intimidation to develop under our watch. What is unacceptable is that it took a human child to finally put a stop to it. This jaw dropped slightly. He was not accustomed to being spoken to in such a manner. Dean L. continued, "No disciplinary action will be taken against Monroe. Her response to an unprovoked assault was proportionate and justified. She will continue her studies at this academy without interruption." "And what of my son?" demanded. "He lies in the medical bay, injured and humiliated. What justice does he receive?" "Your son will face a conduct review upon his recovery. The evidence of his harassment of other students over the years will be examined. Appropriate consequences will be determined." The dean's voice hardened. "I suggest you prepare him for the possibility that his time at this academy may be coming to an end." Stared at the dean for a long, tense moment. Then he made a sound of pure frustration and stormed out of the office, his heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor. When the door closed behind him, some of the tension left the room. Commander Monroe let out a breath he had been holding. His posture relaxed slightly. Dean L. turned to face them again. "Miss Monroe, may I ask you something off the record?" Nodded. "You could have stopped sooner. After the first strike, Axe was no longer a threat to you. Why did you continue?" Was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. Because he needed to understand something. They all do. Everyone who watched what happened today, every species that has been watching humans and dismissing us as weak and harmless. They needed to see the truth. "And what is that truth?" Stood up, smoothing her uniform. Her father stood with her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Humans are not weak," she said. "We have never been weak. We survived ice ages and predators and famines and wars. We conquered our planet and reached for the stars. We did it without claws or scales or venom. We did it with our minds and our determination and our refusal to give up." She looked at the dean with those steady green eyes. "We are not weak. We are just polite. We try kindness first because we believe it is the right thing to do. But when kindness fails, when someone forces us to defend ourselves, we are capable of things that no other species has imagined." She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. "I hope you never have to see what humans can really do when we stop being polite. I hope the galaxy never pushes us that far. Because my people have spent thousands of years learning how to destroy things bigger and stronger than ourselves. And we are very, very good at it." She walked out of the office, her father following close behind. Dean L. sat alone in the silence she left behind, thinking about her words and wondering if the galaxy truly understood what kind of species it had welcomed among the stars. He suspected they were only beginning to learn. The footage spread across the station within hours. Despite official attempts to contain it, copies appeared on every personal device, every shared network, every social platform that connected the students of Galactic Academy. By the end of the first day, everyone had seen it. By the end of the week, it had spread to other stations, other worlds, other systems. The galaxy watched a small human girl defeat the largest bully at the most prestigious academy in known space. They watched it again and again, slowing it down, analyzing every movement, trying to understand how something so impossible had happened. Monroe became famous without wanting to be. She continued attending her classes, taking notes, eating meals in the cafeteria, but everything around her had changed. Students who had never noticed her before now stepped aside when she walked through the corridors. They watched her with a mixture of curiosity and respect that she found uncomfortable. The other 11 human students at the academy reported similar experiences. The casual harassment they had endured since arriving, the dismissive comments and minor cruelties, had stopped completely. Other species looked at them differently now. They saw something they had never seen before. Potential. 1 month after the confrontation, was sitting in the botanical gardens during her lunch break. The earth plants surrounded her, the familiar sense of home filling the air. She was reading a book on her tablet when a small shadow fell across the page. She looked up to see him standing before her. They were one of the smallest species in the galaxy, rarely growing taller than 4 feet. They had delicate bodies covered in soft feathers, with wings that could carry them in low-gravity environments. Their large eyes took up most of their faces, giving them an appearance that humans often found endearing. This particular was female, with blue and silver feathers that marked her as young. Her name, would learn, was Trill. She had been one of Axe's most frequent victims before the humans arrived. "I am sorry to bother you," Trill said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her translator converted the musical tones of her language into soft English. "I wanted to thank you." Set her tablet aside. "Thank me for what?" "For showing everyone that size does not determine strength, for proving that the powerful can be brought down by those they consider weak." Trill's large eyes glistened with emotion. "Axe hurt me many times. He hurt many of my people. No one ever stood against him. Until you." Felt something tighten in her chest. "I am sorry that happened to you. I wish I had been here sooner." Trill shook her head. "You could not have known, but you are here now, and things are different." She hesitated, her feathers ruffling nervously. "I have a request. It may be too much to ask. Please feel free to refuse." "What is it?" "Would you teach me how to defend myself? I know I am small. I know I cannot fight like you do, but perhaps there is something, some technique that could help me protect myself if someone tries to hurt me again." Studied the small alien for a long moment. She thought about what her father had always told her. Knowledge was meant to be shared. Skills were meant to be passed on. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and everyone deserved a chance to protect themselves. "Sit down," she said. "Let us talk." That conversation was the beginning of something larger than either of them could have imagined. Within a week was meeting with Trill and 3 other students in an empty practice room after classes. She taught them basic principles: how to move, how to breathe, how to use an attacker's momentum against them. She adapted techniques designed for human bodies to work with their different anatomy. Word spread. More students asked to join, who had been targeted for their nervous dispositions. Silicates who wanted to understand how the human had defeated one of their kind so easily. Even a few showed up, curious about the techniques that had brought down one of their strongest. Turned no one away. 3 months after the confrontation, her informal self-defense class had grown to include 47 students from 22 different species. The Academy administration initially tried to shut it down, concerned about what they called unsanctioned combat training. But then they noticed something interesting. The incident reports had dropped dramatically. Bullying, harassment, physical altercations, all of the problems that had plagued the Academy for years were declining rapidly. Students who had once been victims were walking through the corridors with new confidence. Predator species that had once terrorized the weak were keeping their distance, suddenly uncertain of what might happen if they tried their old tactics. The Academy decided to look the other way. Then they officially recognized class as an approved extracurricular activity. Then they offered her a teaching assistant position and a small stipend. Refused the money. She did not want payment for this. She just wanted everyone to feel safe. Commander Daniel Monroe came to visit during the spring break. He found his daughter in the large training hall that the Academy had provided for her classes, demonstrating a joint lock technique to a group of eager students. She moved through them like water, adjusting postures, correcting forms, offering encouragement with patience and kindness. He watched from the doorway for a long time, feeling a pride he could barely contain. When the class ended and the students dispersed, walked over to her father and hugged him. It was the first time he had seen her truly happy since she arrived at the Academy. "You know," he said, "when I enrolled you here, I worried about you being alone among aliens." laughed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I am not alone, Dad. I never was." She gestured to her students, who were gathering their belongings and chatting in small groups. A dozen different species, united by a shared experience and a common purpose. Some of them had become her friends. Some had become like family. "Humans have always been good at making friends," she continued. "We just needed to earn their respect first." Across the training room, a young raised his hand, recognized him immediately. His name was Al, and he was Axe's cousin. He had joined the class 2 months ago, nervous and uncertain, half expecting to be turned away because of his family connection. Had welcomed him without hesitation. The sins of one family member did not define another. "Miss Monroe," Al called out, "I have a question about the joint manipulation technique from yesterday. I cannot seem to get the angle right." Smiled at her father and excused herself. She walked over to the young and began demonstrating the technique again, patient and encouraging, her hands guiding his movements with gentle corrections. Her father watched her teach, watched her interact with beings from species that humanity had barely known existed 30 years ago. This was what he had hoped for when he pushed for human children to attend galactic academies. Not conquest, not competition, connection. Humans had so much to offer the galaxy. Not weapons or threats or domination, but something far more valuable. The simple truth that everyone, regardless of species or size, deserved to feel safe. The understanding that strength was not about how big you were, but about how you used what you had. Axe had recovered from his injuries months ago. He had returned to the academy briefly, but the conduct review had not gone well for him. Too many victims had come forward, too many years of cruelty documented and confirmed. His father's influence could only protect him for so long. He had been expelled and sent home in disgrace, had not celebrated his departure. She had simply continued with her work, teaching those who wanted to learn, protecting those who needed protection. That was the human way, not vengeance, not cruelty, just the quiet determination to make things better, one person at a time. As the training hall emptied and the lights dimmed, walked back to her father. They left the academy building together, stepping out onto a balcony that overlooked the vast expanse of stars that surrounded the station. "Do you think we will ever truly belong out here?" asked. "Among all these species that have been traveling the stars for thousands of years?" Her father put his arm around her shoulders and looked up at the infinite darkness filled with light. "We already do," he said. "We just needed someone to show them who we really are." They stood there together, father and daughter, looking out at the galaxy that humanity had joined. It was vast and strange and sometimes dangerous, but it was also full of possibilities. And humans had always been good at making the most of possibilities. Far below them, in the station's network, the footage of a small human girl defeating a massive alien bully continued to circulate. New viewers discovered it every day. New species learned to look at humanity with fresh eyes. The galaxy was changing, and it was only the beginning.